I'm Danny.
I'm Keon.
I'm Ram.
My name is Mo.
Our topics are for our polls is about people's knowledge of the current geopolitics. We tested this in three parts. First, they had to identify image of head of the states from around the world. Second, we had them locate countries on map, and the last they had to identify the country with the current events happening in the said countries.
The first 5 questions are demographic questions. We picked basic demographic questions, partially so we can avoid ones that people might feel reluctant to answer, such as income, as well as getting basic information about the respondents. We feel that the demographics that we selected are relevant to the questions because they covered the basics, such as their age, political views, race, etc. These indicators are core to one's identity and can shape how they were raised and their worldview.
The last 15 questions were related to our topic. We split the 15 questions into 3 different sections, each containing 5 questions. The first section was asking respondents if they could identify pictures of world leaders. Each of the leaders are important in their country, and someone who pays attention to the news frequently should be able to know who they are. We expected the respondents to just say the country in which the leader is from, or the name of the leader. So if by showing them the picture of the Turkey Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, we have expected either for them to say Turkey or Erdogan. Then we also had Merkel and Modi. We also had Xi Jinping, China's Prime Minister, and Mike Pence.
In the second section, we named a country to the respondents, and they would have to point to the country on this blank political map of the world. If they didn't know, we'd ask them to make an educated guess. The countries we asked them to locate were Syria, Ukraine, Venezuela, North Korea, and Afghanistan. All of these countries are currently relevant. For example, there is a conflict between Ukraine and Russia in eastern Ukraine.
In the third section of the survey, we would read out a current event happening in a country, and they would have to answer the name of the country that matches best with that current event. For example, we asked, civil war, famine, and foreign intervention from Saudi Arabia, Iran, and to an extent the United States, is plaguing this country. The best answer for this one was Yemen. Some confused Syria, but we were looking for the best answers to this. Yemen, rather than Syria, is currently suffering a famine as a result of the conflict and civil war occurring there.
Before we started the poll, I thought that most of the respondents would not get many of the answers correct. While the questions are relatively basic for someone who follows the news, very few of my friends watch the news, and I guess that most West Valley students would also not watch the news. I didn't think people would be able to identify countries on a map either. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel has a segment in which he asks people to identify any country on a map, and most of the respondents could not name one. So based on this, I did not think people would.
I thought before this poll, people would not willing to answer the questions and not be able to answer them. I thought that they would feel uncomfortable answering the question of religion.
I thought that most people would be able to tell who the political leaders were. However, geography-wise, I did expect that most people would not be able to locate the countries we given them. However, I did expect them to know like the basic countries that the U.S. have been involved with, such as Afghanistan, who we have been at war with for 18 years.
I know about that stereotype where Americans are very bad at geography, and I believe it because I think it's true. So I was expecting this to be the case, where people will not be able to answer most of these questions. However, I was expecting them to answer at least some of them. Because, it's a college campus, and college students, you can kind of see in the media where, like they're politically active. So you kind of get this impression that they'd be able to answer, at least some of them, if not most of them.
Our respondents were a mix of people who we know personally and random people on the West Valley College campus who agreed to take the survey. Most people we asked did agree to take the poll, only 4 people refused. After compiling the data into a spreadsheet, we began analyzing the responses using the demographic data that we collected. For most of our demographic questions, we got a wide variety of responses. The only category in which we got almost no variety was the age category. We only interviewed 3 people who were not in the 18 to 24-year-old age category. The main reason for this disparity is likely because most of the people at West Valley College are in this age group, and most of the people who we know are also in this age group.
Independents tend to be less knowledgeable when it came to our survey questions, nor did it seem that they were as politically involved, based on their vibe and their responses given during the interview. For example, only 1/3 of independents managed to correctly identify a picture of Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, 7 out of 13, over half, of our Democratic respondents managed to correctly identify Xi Jinping. Furthermore, only 4 out of 21 independents managed to correctly match Iran to its current event. Meanwhile, 4 out of 5 Republicans managed to correctly do so. In the next 2 questions, religion played an interesting role in the respondents' responses to the questions. When it came to correctly identifying a picture of Erdogan, only 2 out of 7 Muslims managed to correctly identify his picture. However, only 3 of 13 Christians correctly identified him. When it came to identifying Syria on a map, about 70% of Muslims and 40% of Christians managed to correctly point out Syria on a map. A higher proportion of Muslims managed to guess Syria correctly, 70%, than Christians, 40%, because, from my inferences, because Syria is a Muslim-majority country, Muslims would have more insight on the geography and location of Muslim-majority countries than other people. 32.5%, just under 1/3, of respondents managed to correctly match Hong Kong with the world issue. The question asked the respondents were, a series of proposed and/or passed laws have led to millions protesting in the streets, which led to a violent crackdown by local law enforcement. This is especially lower than we expected due to the extensive media coverage and social media awareness and outrage. Furthermore, some people may have not guessed Hong Kong due to the fact that it isn't a country, but rather one of China's 2 special administrative regions. However, due to certain reasons and circumstances regarding its autonomy, history, and current status, we decided to include it.
Only 30% knew how Modi was from the picture presented. Remember, India is the second most populous country in the world, the largest democracy in the world, and the respondent did not even have to say their name, just the country they are from. 28% of people currently matched Yemen with the world issue. 32% of our respondents did not know who Mike Pence was.
78% of our respondents didn't know where Afghanistan was. And that was pretty surprising, especially that we've been at war with Afghanistan and it's been all over the news for over 15 years now. We live in a democracy where the people elect the presidents and the senators that form our foreign policy. And so the fact that they don't know where Afghanistan, a zone of conflict is pretty troubling.
93% of people knew that Russia was accused of interfering in the presidential elections. Our data shows that most people don't keep up with the news enough to get most of these questions right. Yet, by far, this was the question that had the most correct answers. We can argue that the Russia investigation is being covered more thoroughly by the media than any other news issue asked in this poll, based on the high percentage of correct responses. Far more than crises like the famine in Yemen or the protests in Hong Kong.
But I am very surprised when I contact the different peoples to conduct this poll. I feel that they are more cooperative. When I tell them the purpose of this, they feel very happy and they have given me the correct and detailed answers to my all questions.
I was proven right that most people would not know the answers to the questions. This did sadden me though, because it really says a lot about how our education system is really failing people. Most of the people we asked were on this campus or enrolled in some other community college or a senior in high school.
People were more ignorant on geopolitics than I thought they would be, and even then, I had pretty low standards. And it was honestly kind of solidified the stereotype of the American who's ignorant of geography. It was actually surprising, as even in with my standards, people answered fewer questions correctly than I thought. I remember there were people who basically couldn't answer any of the questions, and the surveys went quite quickly as a result of them not being able to answer those questions. Daniel was actually quite right about how ignorant people were. Many of the college students were actually quite unknowledgeable when it came to politics, and they were not as polarized in the political views as I thought they would be. More people did get Syria correct than I thought, which made me lose a little bit less faith in humanity than otherwise. In a democracy, you would expect people to be informed, as they end up voting for representatives, propositions, and in referendums. But this seems to not be the case. In conclusion, most college students are uninformed about many basic issues going on around the world. Most of these people are attending college or have previously attended a college, and yet are ignorant of important information that relates to this world. While conducting our surveys, we had quite a bit of funny answers from some of our respondents. For example, when we showed a picture of Xi Jinping to one of the respondents, they answered, "Winnie the Pooh." We gave it to them. We considered it correct because Xi Jinping Winnie the Pooh comparisons have been commonly made by opponents of the Chinese Communist Party as a way to mock his supposed resemblance to the character. This especially became internationally known when China blacklisted Winnie the Pooh in July of 2017.
When we showed the picture of Mike Pence to one of our respondents, he actually answered Obama. Yes, Obama. Although he wasn't really serious about his answer, it was pretty funny.
I also had a lot of funny responses to my questions. One example was when I asked someone to point to North Korea on a map and they pointed to India. Another was when I asked someone to identify a picture of Angela Merkel and they answered Hillary Clinton. Another example is when I asked which country interfered in the 2016 presidential election and they answered Canada. When I asked them about which country's prime minister had been recently accused of blackface, they answered Mike Pence.